I'm not sure if you have read this, but there's a book, of course, from C.S. Lewis called The Screw Tape Letters. And you'll come across at the end of the 8th letter a term or a phrase called the law of undulation. The law of undulation. And undulation is simply a fancy word that means wave-like rhythms, right? I'm sorry. Wave-like rhythms. Undulation. Ups and downs. Highs and lows. Peaks and valleys. All right? Promises fulfilled, promises yet waiting. C.S. Lewis mentions that we are amphibians and we have one foot in the spiritual world, like angels, and one foot in the material earth, like animals. Look at that, right? He says we belong to the spirit world, but we live in human timing, meaning we are spirit beings and we live on this earth. And he mentions that mostly our lives are pointed in one direction. We find ourselves pointed towards God, directed towards an eternal prize, as he says in the book, being with Jesus. But our bodies are subservient to the time that we live in. So we get tired, we get restless, we get bothered, we get angry, right? We're in a continual flux. And the result is undulation, ups and downs, peaks and valleys. In every area of our life, there are periods of emotional richness that are regularly followed by dryness and dullness. In every area of our life, we will see peaks and winds, regularly followed by valleys and lows. Every area of our life, we will experience great wins and successes, followed by tragedies and tests. So what does all this have to do with obedience? Let me read you what author Joe Rigney states. And he wrote this, and it touched me, and it just so speaks to what God is calling us to when it comes to obedience, especially in the tough places of our lives. And I'll read quickly. At times in the Christian life, God makes his presence manifest and felt. He makes himself sensibly present to us with an emotional sweetness that empowers us to more easily triumph over temptation. Obedience flows from us like rivers from a living spring. Prayer is like breathing, the most natural and normal overflow to God's felt presence in our lives. These are the peaks of the Christian life. But remember, there's peaks and they're regularly followed by. But then comes the valleys and the troughs. God withdraws himself, not in actual fact, but from our conscious experience, from our felt reality. In doing so, he removes the emotional support and spiritual incentives that made obedience seem so natural and effortless. In these times, God is calling us to carry out our duties. Hear this. In these times, the lows, God is calling us to carry out our duties without the emotional richness and relish that his felt presence provides, though not apart from his sustaining grace. Read again. In these times, God is calling us to carry out our duties without the emotional richness and relish that his felt presence provides, though not apart from his sustaining grace. In doing so, we grow into creatures whose wills are more fully conformed to his own. In doing so, in being obedient, even in the low parts of our lives, in being obedient, in doing so, we grow into creatures whose wills are more fully conformed to his own. Let me ask you a question. Is obedience hard in the valley because it's not something we want to see? Is it not harder to be obedient in the low seasons because when it was going great, we felt the joy of obedience. We felt this is great. He's with me. He's here. Like, we don't always feel that. And if you're like me, in some seasons, you were in a season where you didn't feel God. You didn't feel it when you were obedient. You didn't feel the joy of it. You didn't see the result of it. Sometimes you kind of laid back in this place and you're like, man, what is God doing? What is happening? Where are you? This is the law of undulation. Peaks and valleys, highs and lows. God's call for obedience is not just for when we're on the mountaintop, but it's actually for those times when we're in the valley. If in the valley, can God still trust you to be obedient?